They said my $50,000 in farm grants was gone. The government shut it all down. I'm never gonna see another dime. But last week I got paid, dude. So what's the deal? Is this actually the end of USDA funding for small-scale farmers? Are farm grants actually disappearing? And if you've applied for a grant, should you be worried? Or should you still apply? Plus, why do these programs even exist in the first place? And who actually benefits from them? So in today's video, we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna talk about it all, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're gonna talk about why these programs even exist in the first place.
Man's greed and years of careless cultivation now took their toll.
Who actually benefits from them, how the funding freeze has affected me personally and my personal opinions about it, and most importantly, can you still apply for USDA grants? Hey, what's up, Gromies? Welcome back to Chef's Harvest Farm. If you're new here, I'm Chef Mikey. I'm a former executive chef turned urban farmer, and a couple of months ago, I made a viral video called How I Got $50,000 in grants to fund my backyard farm. And since then, the comment section has exploded with all kinds of crazy things. A lot of people like just super excited that I was sharing that information with them so that they could pursue grants. People who were just cheering me on, you know, excited and happy for me that I was able to secure that type of funding for my small scale farm, all the way to people outright calling me a criminal, furious at me, and they're like, this guy's a criminal. I can't believe you're stealing taxpayers' money and that my money's going to fund your business. I can't believe it. One lady even said, if you're not giving 20% of your business's revenue away to the homeless, then you're a bad person and you should be ashamed of yourself. That lady clearly doesn't own a business. And then there's this dude, food stamps for farmers. So before we talk about if these grants are actually disappearing, let's talk about how these grants actually work in the first place. Because if you were to read the comments on that video, you would think that the government just wrote me a check for $50,000 and said, have a nice day. But that's not at all how this works. So let me explain how it actually worked for me. Years ago, I saw a YouTube video where somebody said they got a free high tunnel from the government through a grant program. You know, several years went by, I taught myself how to grow food, and after I quit my job and I was farming full-time, I'd already built 3 high tunnels over here. You know, I wanted to see if I could get another one, so I said, what the heck? I figured I was like such a small scale that there's no way these people would approve me. They wouldn't take me seriously. These programs probably only exist for big farms, right? But it's actually quite the opposite. They exist for small farms. So after I went in there and I applied, they actually came out here, they looked at my farm and saw that I was already farming, right? I wasn't trying to start a farm. I had already started a farm. You know, after the lady left that day, I didn't hear back from them for over a year. And then a year later, they called me back and said I was approved for a high tunnel. So I had already built 3 high tunnels and paid for them out of pocket. So then last year, I built this high tunnel right here. That's the first thing they ever paid for here. And so after I built it, you know, I had to put all the money up front, pay for all the laborers for my workers to help me build it. And then months later, they reimburse you paid by the square foot. So they measure your high tunnel. Doesn't matter how much it costs. So my high tunnels are 800 square feet. So they paid me about $3,500. I buy these Farmer's Friend Caterpillar tunnels, and it actually does cover the whole cost. You know, so that's just kind of how it works. So it pays by the square foot. So you can understand that, right? So then that's how I got the first check. It's not like it's game-changing money, right? It's not like they sent me $50,000 to stick in my pocket and go to Hawaii, or they didn't even send me money for the high tunnel. They reimbursed me after I built it. That's how it worked. So the USDA will let you apply for a high tunnel every year. So then after I built this one, then the following year I went and I applied for a second one, and I just built this one. We just finished it last week. And so this one is a little bit bigger, and I think that the payment was $4,700. And this time, because I had such a history with them already, I actually got them to give me part of the money up front. I built the high tunnel, and then when I was completed, then they paid me the rest of it. And then there's like a small irrigation grant where they just like pay a few $100s for the irrigation in the high tunnel. I had like a pretty large water line project. It cost me $4,200 and the USDA grant was about $400. So you see what I'm saying? Like, they paid me a little bit of money, but I still had to pay a lot of money up front, and they only covered a portion. So they pay for very specific projects, and they're generally supposed to be cost share programs where they just incentivize you to actually do the work, right? They don't do it for you. They don't pay for all of it. Okay, so that's just one part of the grants that I applied for that cover infrastructure projects, right? And then there's a whole different program that I applied for called the Conservation Stewardship Program. And this is an environmental incentive program where they pay farmers to grow cover crop because they store carbon in the soil and they help protect the soil from erosion. And without healthy soil, there's no food, and America has no future. So for this program, I get paid $6,000 a year for 5 years. So again, spread out over time. And it's a great perk for farming sustainably, but it's not something that makes or breaks my farm. But it definitely helps with the cost of building healthy soil, because everything costs money, even if it doesn't produce an income. That's why it's super important that I'm tracking all of my expenses and the grant funding so that I don't end up paying taxes on that money. And that's where FarmRaise comes in. FarmRaise is just like QuickBooks, only it's made for farmers. So it automatically categorizes all my expenses for my Schedule F form. And right now, you can get 20% off your FarmRaise subscription with my code CHEFM20. So don't wait. Go over to farmraise.com right now, because let's face it, I know QuickBooks is stressing you out. Okay, so now that we understand how these grants actually work, let's talk about why they exist in the first place and who they benefit. Because a lot of people think it's just like food stamps for farmers, right? But the truth is, these programs weren't created for farmers. They're created to protect the land and prevent environmental disasters.
The dangers of drought were learned, but soon forgotten. The fertile soil, considered inexhaustible, was taken for granted. Man's greed and years of careless cultivation now took their toll. The uncovered earth had given all it had to give. The land, mistreated, parched by drought, was pulverized to produce still more wheat. A futile race with the creditor, creating only dust, ready to blow. In the spring of 1934, the winds caught up the broken soil, and a plague of dust descended upon those who had treated the land with ignorance and contempt. Clouds of dust billowed up to 15,000 feet in the air, shutting off the sun, eventually turning day into night. Sand had to be shoveled from railroad tracks before trains could pass. Airplanes were grounded, and a sense of impending doom permeated the cities of the plain, turned into darkness at midday. The topsoil of the country was blowing away, withering vegetation from millions of acres of farmlands, choking the air so that it was painful to breathe without a damp cloth over nose and mouth. This was only the beginning. For those on the southern plains, dust would become a way of life, their land, the Dust Bowl.
The USDA isn't handing out money to people who say, oh, I'd love to start a farm, but I can't afford it. These programs fund people to incentivize them to continue using sustainable farm practices. So to be approved for any of these grants, they have like some type of satellite imagery, and they look at your property in their satellite and they determine if you're on highly erodible land. So that's what you need to qualify. You need to be a landowner in the United States of America, and it has to be highly erodible land. So meaning the grants are not for me, and the grants are not for my business. They belong to the highly erodible land on which they protect. Meaning, if I sell my house, I can't take these high tunnels with me. They belong to this land. For example, whether they paid for the high tunnel over here or not, I probably would have built it anyways. I just installed a pollinator garden over here. It's like a few $100s they pay for that. It's not much, but like whether they were gonna pay for that or not, I was gonna build that pollinator garden anyways. It's for pest control, to attract beneficial insects closer to my garden so they can live right here and they can eat the pests over here. But they understand that and they want to incentivize me to do so. They looked and said, oh, you're already growing cover crops. Like, dude, we'll pay you for that. It's like, sweet, okay, I'll take it. So the grants aren't awarded based on need. They're awarded based on your ability to complete the project, and then it incentivizes you to do so. So no, these aren't handouts. They're strategic investments in protecting our land, water, and food security. So now with all the headlines about grant freezes and budget cuts, what's actually going on? Is this the beginning of the end of USDA funding for farmers? Or is there still a way for farmers to get funding? Let's break it down. So as soon as those headlines started coming out, the comments section of that video, people like started attacking me. People who have no idea how these programs actually work all of a sudden are acting like experts just to show their support for the orange buffoon pulling the strings, you know? But here's the thing. While those people are cheerleading for the Trump administration, I was actually in contact with the NRCS. So I did what any normal person would do. I texted my rep and I said, hey man, what's up? Do you still have a job? And then within minutes, he just called me right back. So I just finished building this high tunnel right here. They still owed me some money on it. And then I got the pollinator habitat over here, which is like a few $100s. So any of it, you know, if they didn't pay me, it wasn't a big deal. You know, it was gonna be fine. So when all the headlines started and everything, I just went ahead, completed the projects, and then I texted my guy. Within a couple of days, he came out, he approved everything, and 2 days later, I got a deposit for $1,400 from the USDA. So these programs are not abolished, the funding is not frozen, and I just got paid. And guess what? I'm still on track to get $6,000 a year for the Conservation Stewardship Program. And so, you know, obviously it's the same for them too. We're all just people, right? Just living in the same world, trying to figure this out. So I talk to them just like regular people. Like, yo, what's up, bro? You still got a job? He's like, yeah, we're still here for now, man. I was like, well, what's good? Like, are these programs gonna go away? Am I still gonna get paid? He said, your contracts are signed, so it's no problem. You're definitely gonna get paid. I said, what about the Conservation Stewardship Program? Am I still gonna get those payments for the next 4 years or whatever? Because I've only gotten one payment so far. And he said, yes, absolutely. Those programs aren't going anywhere. He said, like, some of the things that they're trying to abolish or some of the new funding programs that the Biden administration came out with for what they called the Inflation Reduction Act to help with inflation, I guess, but I didn't participate in that program, to be honest. Like, the grants that I've participated in thus far have been great for me, but at this point I'm just like making YouTube videos. I'm making money with that. It's a headache to do the grants, right? And at this point I'm just looking to fund everything myself through YouTube, you know? So I'm probably not going to participate in any more grants after these ones that I'm already participating in are over. And let's be honest, the government's probably never going to stop funding farms. Agriculture is the backbone of the American economy. If they stopped funding farmers altogether, the whole economy would collapse. And that's just a whole bigger thing, right? Like, the United States Department of Agriculture subsidizes conventional crops like corn and soybeans because they make processed foods and ethanol for your gas tank, you know? If they stopped funding corn farmers, then your gas prices would go way the heck up. I don't really even understand how it all works. It doesn't matter if I understand it or you understand it. That's just the way it works. Okay, so if you want to apply for a USDA or an NRCS grant, do I think you should still do so? Absolutely. I mean, what the heck do you have to lose, people? You go in there, you fill out an application. If you get approved, it's great. If you don't, then you're right where you were to begin with anyways. And if something happens, like you get approved for the funding, you build the infrastructure, but the funding goes away and they actually don't pay you for some reason, I mean, that's the worst case scenario, right? So how bad could that be? It just means that you have to figure something out, right? You just have to find a different way to pay for something. So how do you do that? You get a loan, you sell stuff. It can definitely be a problem, but farming is filled with problems, right? Like, there's people out there crying because they can blame the orange guy, right? But there's nobody to blame when groundhogs get into your garden and just eat half your crops or eat all your crops, right? Or a storm comes through and blows down your greenhouse. You always want to think about what's the worst case scenario, right? So what happens if they don't pay you? So take that into consideration, right? Tread lightly with these things, but nonetheless, if you don't take the money, they're going to give it to somebody, guarantee you that. That's why I take it. Right? So that's just the mindset you have to have going into this. These grants aren't something that I rely on to run my farm. They're just incentives to keep using sustainable practices. And that's exactly how you need to think of it. This isn't money you can't farm without. This isn't a business model. This is an opportunity. And if you get funding, great. It helps you farm more sustainably and implement more sustainable practices on your farm. If you don't, you keep farming, you keep growing, you figure it out. That's how business works. That's how life works. Obstacles come up all the time in life and business, and this is just another obstacle. All right, y'all, so just to wrap it up, I'll give you my personal opinions about everything going on here. First, I don't identify as a Democrat or a Republican. I don't live my life by normal standards. I wake up every morning at 3 a.m. I walk out to my garden and I make YouTube videos. It's the only thing that matters. I see Donald Trump. I see all these politicians. It's just a bunch of rich people yelling at each other, but nobody's saying nothing. None of it matters to me. The only things that matter in my life is my family, my garden, and YouTube. I got much better things to worry about in life than what's going on in politics, like if there's caterpillars on my weed plants. You understand? So while everyone else is out there getting worked up over politicians that they're never gonna meet, I'm gonna be right here in my garden, growing food and making YouTube videos. That's all I got for you today. Appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks, guys.